With flames and smoke rising from the city of Rafah, Israel carried out strikes in the southern Gaza Strip.
The attack was in response to a rocket fired from the Palestinian enclave. More details on this later in the news. Good evening, I am CJ Hirro.
And I'm Ricci, Alagao, Flores, and this is Mata ng Agila International. For today's top stories, 6 dead and over a dozen injured after multiple explosions hit a school in Kabul, Afghanistan. Israel strikes Gaza after a rocket attack as Jerusalem tensions spike.
Of extreme weather conditions.
South Africa declares state of emergency due to deadly floods. Woman tumbles off platform under moving train in Argentina. And Billie Eilish makes Coachella history as the youngest headlining performer. The Russian army said it had destroyed a large depot of foreign weapons that was recently delivered to Ukraine near the western city of Lviv. Russian planes struck and destroyed a Ukrainian logistics center holding large batches of foreign weaponry delivered to Ukraine over the past 6 days by the United States and European countries.
18-го апреля высокоточными ракетами воздушного базирования ВКС России в районе Львова нанесен удар по 124-му объединенному центру обеспечения тыла.
Russian Defense Ministry spokesman Igor Konashenkov said a store of ammunition was also destroyed in the Kiev region. A total of 16 Ukrainian military sites in total were destroyed yesterday, including fuel and ammunition depots and a factory for repairing Tochka-U tactical missiles.
Russia launched a major offensive into eastern Ukraine, opening a new phase of invasion after its efforts to capture the capital was thwarted. In recent weeks, Russia's military campaign has refocused on the eastern region of Donbas, which pro-Moscow separatists have partly controlled since 2014. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Telegram confirmed reports that Russian troops have indeed begun the battle for Donbas.
Зараз вже можна констатувати, що російські війська розпочали битву за Донбас, до якої давно готувались. Дуже значна частина всієї російської армії зараз сконцентрована для цього наступу. Скільки б туди не згоняли російських військових, ми будемо боротись, ми будемо захищатись, ми будемо це робити щоденно. Нічого українського не віддамо, а чужого.
Local authorities said Russian shelling killed at least 8 civilians in eastern Ukraine. A large Russian offensive in the Donbas region had been predicted by Ukraine's army for weeks.
Liechtenstein will convene the UN General Assembly to debate a draft resolution backed by Washington. The said resolution will require the 5 permanent members of the Security Council to justify their use of the veto. Aiming to cut back the members' use of their veto powers, the proposal was revived by Russia's recent conflict with Ukraine. Moscow's veto power has allowed it to paralyze action in the Security Council, which is supposed to intervene in such conflicts as a guarantor of global peace per the UN Charter. Co-sponsored by some 50 countries, including the United States, the Liechtenstein proposal should be the subject of an upcoming vote, according to diplomats. Significantly, none of the other 4 permanent members of the Security Council namely Russia, China, France, and Britain, co-sponsor the proposal. The Security Council also has 10 non-permanent members, which do not have the right to veto or of veto. The proposal text obtained by AFP provides for a convocation of 193 members of the General Assembly within 10 working days of the casting of a veto by one or more permanent members of the Security Council to hold a debate on the situation as to which the veto was cast. Among the co-sponsors who have committed to voting for the text are Ukraine, Japan, and Germany. The latter two hope to be permanent members in a possibly enlarged Security Council in view of their global political and economic influence.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said Western countries scored an own goal by imposing sanctions on Russia over the conflict in Ukraine. Putin believes the measures led to a deterioration of the economy in the West. In a news agency interview posted on Twitter, Putin admitted that reprisals for sanctions imposed on Russia by the West impacted business and complicated the logistics of foreign and domestic supplies. However, he said Russia's domestic economy is doing well, inflation is stabilizing, and retail demand in the country has normalized. According to Putin, Russia withstood this unprecedented pressure. The situation is stabilizing. The ruble exchange rate has returned to the levels of the first half of February and is supported by an objectively strong balance of payments.
3 blasts rocked a boys' school in a Shiite Hazara neighborhood of the Afghan capital earlier today, killing 6 people and injuring 11. Kabul police spokesman Khalid Zadran said on Twitter the blasts at the Abdul Rahim Shahid High School caused casualties among their Shiite brothers. The school is located in the capital's western neighborhood of Dash-e-Barchi, an area mainly inhabited by the Shia Hazara community and previously targeted by the jihadist Islamic State group. A witness told AFP that the blasts occurred as students were coming out of their morning classes. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the attack.
In response to a rocket fired from the Palestinian enclave, Israel carried out its first airstrikes on the Gaza Strip in months. Warning sirens sounded in southern Israel after a rocket was fired from the enclave controlled by the Islamist group Hamas. The Israeli military said the projectile crashed into the sea off Tel Aviv, being intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system. Hours later, the Israeli Air Force said it had hit a Hamas weapons manufacturing site in retaliation. Hamas claimed to have used its anti-aircraft defense to counter the air raids, which caused no casualties, according to witnesses and security sources in Gaza. The first of its kind since January, the incident came after a weekend of Israeli-Palestinian violence that wounded more than 170 people, mostly Palestinian demonstrators. The spike in tensions coincides with both the Muslim holy month of Ramadan and the Jewish festival of Passover. Coming up, lockdown Shanghai reports 7 more COVID deaths.
These floods.
South Africa declares state of emergency after deadly floods. And landslides and flooding in central and southern Philippines took 175 lives. More than 752 million pesos worth of agricultural damages recorded. These and more stories from around the globe when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center, Robig Builders,
Love is all about time. Di minamadali ang pag-prepare. Di minamadali ang pagsasama-sama. Di minamadali ang pagpapasarap. Like the love in every Pure Foods ready-to-eat. Slow cooked and ready in 8 minutes. Sarap na di minadali, ngayon pinadaling lutuin para may time ka sa mga mahal mo. Because love takes time. Pure Foods ready-to-eat.
Bank of Commerce. What we are is personal banking, where we understand that every deposit is your hard-earned money. Every loan is for good reason. Every service aids in your convenience. Every business of ours is meant to grow yours. We hear you, feel you, and we act on your every banking need. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation.
Hirro's Chinese-style luncheon meat. Ox dahil fresh yung pang everyday. Ox dahil ang sarap. Kaya di lang ox. Ox na ox, ang Pure Foods Chinese-style luncheon meat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba, sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
China reported 7 new deaths from COVID-19 in Shanghai among the hundreds of thousands of cases recorded during its weeks-long lockdown. City authorities revealed the city's first virus deaths on Monday, with Tuesday's fatalities bringing the total official toll to just 10 despite the scale of the outbreak. The Shanghai Municipal Health Commission said the 7 victims were aged between 60 and 101 and all suffered from underlying conditions such as heart disease and diabetes. The commission said the patients became very or severely ill after admission to the hospital and died after ineffective rescue efforts, with a direct cause of death being underlying diseases. It also reported more than 20,000 new COVID cases, the vast majority asymptomatic. Beijing insists that its zero COVID policy of hard lockdowns, mass testing, and lengthy quarantines has helped avert fatalities and the public health crisis that have engulfed much of the rest of the world. But some have cast doubt on official figures in the nation, whose vast elderly population has a low vaccination rate. Shanghai health officials noted that less than two-thirds of the city's residents over 60 had received 2 COVID jabs, and less than 40% had received a booster. Hong Kong, meanwhile, has attributed nearly 9,000 deaths to COVID-19 since the Omicron variant surged there in January.
News from the White House. The Biden administration is disappointed that a U.S. federal judge in Florida has struck down the mask mandate for public transportation. The mandate requires face masks on airplanes, subways, trains, buses, taxis, and other forms of public transportation. Amid a rise in COVID-19 cases, it has been recently extended by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, until May the 3rd. However, U.S. District Judge Catherine Kimball Mizell said the mask mandate exceeds the authority of the CDC. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki is not happy with the judge's ruling.
So this is obviously a disappointing decision. The CDC continues recommending wearing a mask in public transit. As you know, this just came out this afternoon. So right now, the Department of Homeland Security, who would be implementing, and the CDC are reviewing the decision. And of course, the Department of Justice would make any determinations about litigation. Who's under here? No more buddy.
On another issue, Psaki said President Joe Biden will not be going to war-torn Ukraine.
There's no plans for the president to go, so let me just reiterate that. But we would not outline from here or anywhere from the government who, if, and when for security reasons. So we wouldn't have any details to preview regardless.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, disclosed its new system for travel risk assessments. The new system places destinations into the following categories: Level 3, high risk for COVID-19. Level 2, moderate risk. Level 1, low risk and unknown. Not enough data to assess risk. Levels 3, 2, and 1 will still be primarily determined by the previous formula of 28-day case counts. The big change is a Level 4 notice, which is reserved for only special circumstances. Level 3 list included Germany, Greece, Ireland, and many European nations. The most notable names on Level 2 COVID-19 moderate are Bolivia, Peru, and South Africa. Meanwhile, Philippines is listed in Level 1, which means that the country is among those which have 49 or fewer cases per 100,000 residents over the past 28 days.
South Africa has declared a national state of disaster following devastating floods in many parts of the country. President Cyril Ramaphosa made the announcement in a nationwide address.
These floods.
Ramaphosa also called for more measures to adapt to the effects of climate change.
These floods are a tragic reminder of the increasing frequency of extreme weather conditions as a result of climate change. We need to increase our investment in climate adaptation measures to better safeguard communities against the effects of climate change.
At least 443 lives have been lost to the floods. Another 48 people are still missing around the east coast city of Durban. Some areas have been completely cut off. Thus, more than 10,000 military personnel have been deployed to help restore power and water as well as search for the missing. It's estimated about 40,000 people have been left homeless. Some 600 schools and 66 healthcare facilities have also been damaged.
The death toll from the onslaught of tropical depression Agaton in the Philippines has climbed to 175, and more than 100 are still missing. The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, said out of the number of fatalities, only 15 have been confirmed so far. Most of the dead are from the eastern Visayas region, where the typhoon caused massive floodings and landslides. Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture, or DA, reported that Agaton has caused 752.2 million pesos of damages in the agriculture sector. Earlier, the DA assured affected farmers of aid, including the provision of rice, corn, and assorted vegetables, seeds, drugs, and biologics for livestock and poultry, survival and recovery program of Agricultural Credit Policy Council, indemnification fund under Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation, and access to quick response fund for rehabilitation. NDRRMC said that as of yesterday, 16 cities and municipalities have declared a state of calamity. The list includes Sara, Lemery, and Pasig in Iloilo, Catil, Davao Oriental, Trento, Agusan del Sur, and Compostela, Laac, Mabini, Maco, Maragusan, Mawab, Moncayo, Montevista, Nabunturan, New Bataan, and Pantucan in Davao de Oro.
China donated $200,000 or 10.2 million pesos to Philippines to support the country for its tropical storm Agaton relief operations. In a Facebook post, Ambassador Wang Xilian said, "Our hearts go out to all the Filipino families who were devastated by Tropical Storm Agaton." He added that Chinese President Xi Jinping, State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi sent respectively messages of sympathy and solidarity to President Rodrigo Duterte and Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin today. The envoy also said that the Chinese government wished all those affected could overcome the difficulties and rebuild their homes at an early date. Earlier, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, reported that 172 lives were lost due to Typhoon Agaton. 156 deaths came in from eastern Visayas, 11 from western Visayas, 3 from Davao, and 2 from central Visayas. 110 people are still missing. Meanwhile, authorities made sure to the public that search and rescue operations will continue, with the hope that more survivors may be rescued.
Also in the Philippines, the Department of Foreign Affairs, or DFA, reported the passing of the Philippine ambassador to China, Jose Santiago Chito Santa Romana. In a statement, the DFA said Santa Romana's death is a great loss for the country. It did not mention details on the cause of the envoy's death. The DFA said the Philippine Embassy in Beijing is coordinating with the Chinese authorities in effecting the immediate repatriation of Ambassador Chito's remains. Ambassador Chito was appointed envoy to Beijing in 2016 in recognition of his deep knowledge of China's history and people. Under his distinguished tenure, the DFA said the Philippine-China relations flourished despite differences. The envoy was a former journalist who headed the Beijing bureau of ABC News. He was also among the first Filipinos to visit the new China when he headed the visiting Philippine youth delegation in 1971.
China on Tuesday confirmed it has sealed a wide-ranging security pact with the Solomon Islands, an agreement Western governments fear could give Beijing a military foothold in the South Pacific. At a regular press conference, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said the foreign ministers of China and the Solomon Islands officially signed recently the framework agreement on security cooperation. A draft version of the agreement leaked last month sent shockwaves across the region over provisions allowing Chinese security and naval deployments to crisis-hit Pacific Island nation. According to the draft, armed Chinese police could be deployed at the Solomon Islands at request to maintain social order. Solomon's Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavares' assurances that he does not intend to allow China to build a military base there has done little to alleviate concerns in Washington. The White House is sending a high-level delegation to the Solomon Islands this week to discuss its concerns as well as the reopening of the U.S. Embassy in the former British Protectorate's capital, Honiara. But Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang accused Western powers of deliberately exaggerating tensions over the pact.
双方将在维护社会秩序、保护人民生命和财产安全、人道主义援助、自然灾害应对等领域开展合作，致力于帮助所方加强维护本国安全的能力建设。中所安全合作方式是公开、透明、开放、包容的，不针对任何第三方，与所罗门群岛现有的双多边安全合作机制并行不悖、相互补充。中所两国外长近日已经正式签署了中所政府间安全合作框架协议。我没有听说中国外长已经到访了所罗门。我们要说的是，太平洋岛国不是谁家的后院，更不是地缘对抗的棋子。岛国有对外合作多元化的实际需要，也有自主选择合作伙伴的权利。蓄意渲染紧张氛围、挑动阵营对立的做法，在岛国地区没有市场。干扰阻挠岛国对华合作的图谋，也注定徒劳。
Several Filipino voters abroad complained about receiving pre-shaded ballots during the first week of overseas absentee voting. After initially dismissing such reports, the Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, said it would find out why the supposed spoiled ballots were mixed with the official ballots. There had been claims and reports of pre-shaded ballots in Singapore and Dubai, but the Department of Foreign Affairs denied such reports in a Senate hearing. Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Brigido Dulay explained that what happened was human error only.
There is no truth to the allegation circulating in social media that pre-shaded ballots were distributed to overseas voters, except for that incident in Singapore where there was an impression that a pre-shaded ballot was given. But we would like to call out the news circulating about this. Insofar as the reports of our post are concerned, the alleged distribution of pre-shaded ballots are fake news. By virtue of a human error, when the ballot was given out to the voter, nagkatikit po yung balota. So meron pong dalawa na naibigay dahil po yung sa imprenta, magkatikit po siya. And when this ballot was filled up, the voter actually filled up 2 ballots. Kasi po magkatikit eh. So when this was brought in to the DCM, nakita naman po yung isa. And that was considered a spoiled ballot. And this was placed, again, partly due to human error, this was mixed and placed in the receptacle for the unused valid ballots.
Meanwhile, the COMELEC can't confirm if the said ballots were authenticated.
If the allegation is that 2 ballots were given, so it must have been authenticated on the first page only, because there's no need to look at the back page, because there's no authentication of the chairman.
In a previous interview with COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia, he said their anti-fake news task force will investigate the reports of pre-shaded ballots.
Meanwhile, in the North and Latin American region, registered Filipino voters in the U.S. appealed to the Commission on Elections to extend the deadline for overseas absentee voting. According to Mark Dominic Lim of the Philippine Embassy in D.C., the delivery of election packets from the COMELEC was delayed for 3 days. About 35,000 overseas absentee registered Filipino voters under the jurisdiction of the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. are affected by this delay. The situation is similar to what happened in the southern region of the U.S., including the states of Alabama, District of Columbia, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. For the embassy's response and other details about the issue, please watch our newscast tomorrow. Next up, in Peru, authorities incinerate more than 16 tons of illegal drugs. Heavily armed thieves attempt robbery in Brazilian city. And heart-stopping moment, woman tumbles off platform under moving train in Argentina. Find out more about these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart, Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
Totoo bang number 1 sa kids ang tender juicy? Patunayan po natin. Pinaka-tender ba talaga ang TJ? Talaga! Wow. Pinaka-juicy? Truly! Pinaka-masarap? The best! Wow! No more questions, Your Honor. Tignan nga? Ubus na po eh. Walang duda! Kids can tell. Pinaka-tender, pinaka-juicy, at pinaka-masarap. Number 1 na tender juicy. May cheese dog at chicken dog pa.
Walang duda! Kids can tell, number 1 ang Pure Foods Tender Juicy.
To Mobile Legends!
Sa harap ko, yung isa naka-stripes, yung isa naka-lousy white collar na damit. Maganda naman siya, kaso parang tsaka ang damit.
Tuloy ba kayo? Wala nang iwanan to, ha? O, bilang. 1, 2, 3!
Ang sagot ni Saba, kaagad kay Pinya.
Ano? Ano nangyari? Ala, kilala kita, alam mo. Ang sama ng ugali mo, nakakainis ka naman eh.
Oh, no. It's Biro only. Oh, no. It's Biro. Sunday 25. It's Biro.
Uy! Pare, alam mo ba, ang tapang pala ni paring Joey. Talaga ba? Oo, tumalo siya sa aeroplano, walang dalang parachute. Paano mo nalaman niya? Sa buro niya.
Ito po ang inyong Tia Melchora. Nasaksihan natin ang masalimuot na buhay ni Leslie. Parang malungkot ka.
Ang aming game ay Balloon Centipede.
This portion is brought to you by SCCI Management and Insurance Agency Corporation and Source Alliance.
In Peru, anti-narcotics police began incinerating more than 16 tons of illegal drugs, including cannabis and cocaine. The bags of illegal substances are being incinerated in this furnace under the watchful eyes of police officers. Lasting until May 1, the burning includes 6.2 tons of cocaine-based paste, 4.6 tons of cocaine, and 5.4 tons of marijuana. It also includes other drugs of lesser weight, such as poppy and opium. The amount of drugs might seem like a lot, but police say it's actually down from nearly 21 tons destroyed last year. Peru's war against illicit drug trafficking has no breaks or rest as the country remains one of the world's largest producers of coca leaf and cocaine.
New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern met with her Singapore counterpart Lee Hsien Loong on her first trip abroad since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The leaders announced new initiatives to boost collaboration on climate change and supply chain resilience. They also discussed the situation in Myanmar following last year's military coup and reiterated their condemnation of Russia's conflict with Ukraine. Ardern is leading a trade delegation to key trading partners Singapore and Japan in a bid to boost its COVID-hit economy as the country reopens its borders. Singapore is New Zealand's fifth largest trading partner, an important market for tourism and dairy products, and a key regional shipping hub.
We need stronger cooperation amongst countries to protect the most vulnerable peoples and places on our planet. At the same time, we see opportunities for practical collaboration as we adopt low carbon and green technologies. This new pillar of cooperation reflects our shared commitment to implement the Paris Agreement and work together to seize growth economies in the green economy.
We experience the impacts of supply chain issues across COVID-19, but there are also opportunities for our businesses to partner in delivering exports and services into South and Southeast Asia in coming decades. I'm pleased that today our officials will officially begin work on supply chain dialogue to support increased supply chain cooperation. This is especially important in a time like this with global uncertainty around COVID and Ukraine.
Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has appointed a new 21-member cabinet ahead of talks with the International Monetary Fund about a bailout. He also dumped two of his brothers and a nephew from his cabinet. The move follows growing anger over the ruling family's mismanagement of the country's economy. Presiding over the nation's most painful downturn in memory, Rajapaksa admitted people are suffering, and he said he deeply regrets it. Sri Lankans are also not taking the crisis well. Lawmakers as well as ordinary people are turning against the government. 2 weeks ago, the entire Sri Lankan government or cabinet resigned en masse. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of protesters have camped out in front of Rajapaksa's seafront office for more than a week to demand for Rajapaksa's resignation.
You can see how many people gathered here. They are shouting we don't have fuel here, we don't have gas here. Now the medical supplies are very low and the food very low. Luckily, few of the countries in the world, especially India, China, few countries, they are helping us. That's true. But I don't know what will happen next because now our reserves are very low. The situation here is very bad. That's the thing. That's why we are coming here.
Mexican lawmakers have rejected power reforms that would have strengthened the country's state-owned electric utility at the expense of private power companies. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO, had promoted the changes but failed to get the two-thirds majority needed to amend the Constitution. U.S. and Canada earlier warned that Mexico is in danger of violating its trade commitments by favoring state-run utilities. The U.S. also said the reforms would undermine efforts to fight climate change as Mexico's state-owned electricity provider is heavily dependent on fossil fuels. Nevertheless, AMLO promoted the changes to roll back the effects of liberalization under previous governments that he said has benefited private companies. He called the lawmakers who had voted against the electricity reforms traitors. AMLO said the group of legislators committed an act of betrayal by becoming outspoken defenders of foreign companies instead of defending the interests of the people and the nation.
Some frightening moments at a train station in Buenos Aires, Argentina, as a woman who fell under a moving train survived. This is the security camera footage of this amazing story. Watch as this young woman on the platform waiting for the train staggers and faints, falling onto the tracks as the train moves forward. Bystanders fear the worst, but then thankfully she is rescued. A police officer pulls her off the tracks back onto the platform. An ambulance is called and the woman is taken to the hospital. Fortunately, the woman did not sustain any injuries. She later told an Argentine television station that she suffered a sudden drop in blood pressure and fainted.
The number of reported sexually transmitted diseases, or STD cases, increased significantly in 2020, the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Washington, Arlene Ocampo tells us how alarming the numbers are.
According to new data published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, reported cases of gonorrhea, syphilis, and congenital syphilis in the United States have surpassed 2019 levels. Reported cases of gonorrhea and primary and secondary, or PNS, of syphilis were up 10% and 7% respectively. Syphilis among newborns, or congenital syphilis, also increased, with reported cases up nearly 15% from 2019. CDC describes this as the clearest picture yet of COVID-19's impact on the U.S. STD epidemic. While reported cases of chlamydia have declined by 13%, the CDC says it is likely due to decreased STD screening and underdiagnosed during the pandemic, rather than a reduction in new infections. Chlamydia historically accounts for the largest proportion of reported STDs in the United States. Director of CDC's National Center for HIV, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention, Dr. Jonathan Merman, says the pandemic put enormous pressure on an already strained public health infrastructure. He says although there were moments in 2020 when it felt like the world was standing still, STDs weren't. Director of CDC's Division of STD Prevention, Dr. Leandro Mena, says social and economic factors such as poverty and health insurance status create barriers, increase health risks, and often result in worse health outcomes for some people. Arlene Ocampo, Mata ng Agila International, Washington, D.C., trusted, connected, on point.
Industry sources say Greece is betting on a strong tourist season this summer. This is despite the international impact of the conflict in Ukraine, the mounting prices, and the loss of hundreds of thousands of Russian tourists. Tourist shop owners in Greece said they started off with very good indications, stalled a bit by the conflict and rising prices. They are hoping the season will be better than the previous year, in which sales were close to zero. As COVID-19 rules ease in different parts of the world, the threat of the virus and the Russia-Ukraine conflict have not stopped the influx of tourists in Greece.
Yeah, I also thought maybe it's not good to travel, but we had so difficult 2 years behind us now, and we said we need to go. We need to do something special for us. And we still, with our thoughts with the Ukrainian people, but we had to do something for us this time.
2 police officers and a bystander were injured in a brazen but failed assault on an armored cash van in Guarapuava, Brazil. Authorities said about 30 robbers armed with machine guns terrorized the streets of Guarapuava. The attackers nonetheless fled empty-handed after an intense exchange of gunfire with the police. To arrest the armed gang, a manhunt complete with tracking dogs and helicopters followed. Video of the assault posted on a news agency's social media page showed Guarapuava residents cowering for safety amid the shootout. Other recordings appeared to show the attackers using hostages as human shields to escape. Police said the armed gang set vehicles on fire at several strategic points, including the police station, to slow the security response to their attack. But in the end, they failed to access the safes in the cash van to steal the money, according to Romulo Suarez, the security secretary for Parana State.
A man has been awarded $450,000 after an unwanted office birthday party caused him a series of panic attacks. According to the lawsuit filed in Kentucky's Kenton County, Kevin Burling has an anxiety disorder. He had politely asked Gravity Diagnostics not to celebrate his birthday at work, which the medical lab normally does not for its employees. The plaintiff said that it would bring on a panic attack and uncomfortable childhood memories. But his manager gave him a birthday party at work in August of 2019, triggering a panic attack. Burling quickly left the party and ate his lunch in his car. He was also criticized the next day for his behavior, which prompted a second panic attack. After being fired by his company, which cited concern about workplace safety, Burling countersued for discrimination against him based on a disability. The jury awarded Burling $300,000 for emotional distress and $150,000 in lost wages. Data from the National Alliance on Mental Illness show that nearly 20% of the American population suffers from anxiety disorders. Up next, Twitter board members who received $3 million collectively will not be paid if Elon Musk buys the company. Apple workers at New York Grand Central store take steps to unionize. And Billie Eilish makes Coachella history as the youngest headlining performer. Mata ng Agila International will return after this short break.
This portion is brought to you by Canrev Corporation, your ventilation and air conditioning specialist. Services offered: supply and installation of elevators, escalators, air conditioners, ventilators, jet towel hand dryers, generators, access control system, factory automation and modernization. For more information, please contact Ami Kanke.
Kaming mga food experts,
expert din sa pagmamahal sa pamilya namin. And when we show our love to those closest to us,
we do it with Pure Foods corned beef.
Our gold standard in beefy taste,
texture, and quality.
That's why for us,
it will always be Pure Foods.
Dahil pag pure ang pagmamahal sa pamilya mo,
pure sarap ang ibibigay mo.
Pure sarap, Pure Foods.
Traveling in style. That's the latest when it comes to astronaut transports taking people to the Artemis mission's launch pad. From Atlanta, Georgia, our correspondent Philip Toledo has the details.
Can you picture astronauts heading to the moon in a canoe? NASA can. Well, maybe not literally, but Canoe Technologies has been selected to provide a new fleet of transport vehicles to help astronauts reach the launch pad of the Artemis missions. According to the press release, the new fleet of vehicles will take crew members from their quarters along the 9-mile stretch to the launch pad. Each vehicle will be large enough to accommodate crew members, support staff, and the required equipment. They will all be electric, a futuristic and environmentally friendly solution. They also feature a modular design to enhance reliability and repairability. These new vehicles are replacing the legacy Astrovan fleet. The original Astrovans were introduced back in the 1983 and carried crews of the space shuttle for their various missions. Canoe investor, chairman, and CEO Tony Agila said, "We are honored to transport the Artemis crew to the launch site for the first human lunar landing in more than 50 years. The selection of our innovative technologies by NASA to take a diverse team of American astronauts to the moon showcases a great commitment to sustainable transportation." Philip Toledo, Mata ng Agila International, Atlanta, Georgia. Trusted, connected, on point.
"16 years after its inception, only a fraction of the Greenbelt project of Iraq has materialized. Envisioned as a lush fortress against desertification and sandstorms, the strip of greenery stands a wilted failure. Eucalyptus, olive groves, and date palms took root in 2006 as part of a plan to form a green protective shield around the city in central Iraq. Now, branches of the stunted olive trees sway between date palms, struggling to grow. Irrigation is sparse, and no one pulls out the weeds anymore. What was meant to be a buffer against frequent dust storms that envelop the country does little to lessen their impact.
بدأ هذا الحزام الأخضر واستبشرنا خيرا بأنه مصاد للرياح ومصاد للأتربة وقلنا يا الله. بعد ذلك بدأ الإهمال. هذا صرف عليه مليارات الدنانير صرفت على هذا الحزام. بعد ذلك تركت الحكومة.
According to a former member of the Karbala Provincial Council, only 9 billion dinars was spent on one part of the project out of the originally planned 16 billion dinars. Iraq has consistently been a low scorer on transparency. International's Corruption Perceptions Index, ranking 157th out of 180 countries for perceived corruption levels in state institutions last year.
Elon Musk took a swipe at Twitter and said that its board of directors won't be compensated for serving if he acquires the company. Musk said in a tweet board salary will be nothing if his bid succeeds, so that's about $3 million per year saved. Musk's announcement came after Twitter adopted a limited duration shareholder rights plan, often referred to as poison pill, in an effort to fend off a potential hostile takeover. The outspoken CEO argued Twitter needs to be transformed into a private company and become a venue for free speech. Musk currently has a 9.1% stake in Twitter and is the social media company's second biggest shareholder. Earlier this week, the Tesla chief executive had offered to buy out the company for $43 billion.
International Monetary Fund, or IMF, Chief Kristalina Georgieva and activist Malala Yousafzai talked about girls' education. Both stress its important link with economic growth. Addressing world leaders and finance ministers, Georgieva underscored the need to educate and empower women if countries want budget revenues to increase.
You want growth to
Malala then urged developed nations to continue and increase financing for education, especially in addressing the girls' education crisis.
An Apple store in New York is the latest target for organized labor. Workers at Apple's Grand Central Station store said they're trying to establish a union. This would be a first at one of the tech giant's retail locations in the United States. The effort calls itself Fruit Stand Workers United. It has to sign up at least 30% of the workers at the store to qualify for a unionization election. Organizers described themselves as working in extraordinary times with the ongoing pandemic and once-in-a-generation consumer price inflation. The Apple effort came as a Starbucks unionization drive in New York spread nationally after election victories last year. Meanwhile, Amazon is also facing a growing challenge from unions after an upstart campaign won an election at a warehouse in nearby Staten Island earlier this month. A vote at a second Staten Island Amazon site is scheduled for later this month.
Emirates President Sir Tim Clark said the airline will keep flying to Russia unless its owner, the Dubai government, tells it not to. Though most major international airlines pulled out of Russia amid sanctions imposed by the West, Emirates is one of the few carriers that is still operating flights to Moscow and St. Petersburg. The Emirates president said the airline also transports humanitarian goods, food and medical supplies, which are not on the sanctions list. He added that it was important to recognize that the Russian population may not be part of the war in Ukraine, and that the diplomatic corps of other countries who have missions in Moscow should be able to function by moving in and out of the country. The United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have rejected calls from Western governments to impose sanctions on Russia.
A pair of familiar faces made it to the top of the winner's stand in the wheelchair division of the 126th Boston Marathon. American Daniel Romanchuk won his second career men's wheelchair title, claiming the victory with a time of 1 hour 26 minutes and 58 seconds. Romanchuk led for 23 miles of the 26.2-mile course, besting a field that didn't include defending champion and five-time Boston winner Marcel Hug, who withdrew hours before the race for unspecified reasons. In the women's race, Switzerland's Manuela Schär won her second straight Boston crown, crossing the line in 1 hour 41 minutes and 8 seconds. Schär led the women's field throughout. Her win came on the heels of her other victories in Berlin last September and London in October.
Billie Eilish headlined the Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival this year and made history as the youngest Coachella headliner ever. The 20-year-old Grammy-winning artist said that she should not be headlining Coachella, but she was grateful for having her dream come true. During her time on stage, Billie performed songs such as When the Party's Over, Everything I Wanted, and Happier Than Ever.
The first trailer of Thor: Love and Thunder sent the Marvel fans into a scream of thrills and excitement as it showcased returning characters and the debut of a new look for Natalie Portman. Thor says in the teaser, these hands were once used for battle, now they're but humble tools for peace. It can be recalled that Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, was destroyed by his sister in Thor Ragnarok movie. Portman is seen at the end of the trailer with a Mjolnir that has been pieced together. The trailer also showcases other popular Marvel characters portrayed by Tessa Thompson, Chris Pratt, and Dave Bautista. The film, directed by Taika Waititi, will be out in theaters by July 8, 2022.
Now let's take a look back at history with today's historical events. In 1897, the first Boston Marathon was held, inspired by the marathon at the first Olympic or modern Olympic Games in 1896. 15 runners started the race, but only 10 made it to the finish line. In 1901, Emilio Aguinaldo issued a proclamation that broke the heart of Filipino revolutionaries nationwide. It was a proclamation of surrender in the Philippine-American War, which ended with over 250,000 Filipino deaths at the hands of 17,000 American troops. In 1967, the Beatles signed a contract to stay together for 10 years. But sadly, the best-selling band of all time split up 3 years later. The final time that the four members recorded together was the session for Abbey Road's closing track, The End.
And as we conclude tonight's broadcast, let us ponder on a quote from Atomic Habits author James Clear. And he said, "You cannot remove struggle from life, but you can improve your ability to handle challenge."
That's right. I totally agree. You know, when you are in a certain situation, it's not always that it controls you. Sometimes you need to adjust in order for you to be able to survive.
Well, struggles will always be part of our lives.
All the time.
And, you know, often we don't have the capacity to get ourselves out of that, but we do have a power. You have to remember that we do have a power, and that is how you change the way you deal with the struggles, how you change the way you deal with the difficulties. And you know what they say? What doesn't kill you makes you tougher and stronger. And that is a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates in our social media channels. I am CJ Hirro.
And I am Nina Ricci, Alagao, Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
This program is supported by SMC Global Power.